Hello. Good to see you again. I'm happy to welcome you on behalf of Mike, who did a brilliant job yesterday. In view of the fact that it was your very first time in front of such a huge audience, well, I don't have this excuse ready today. I try to do my best. I have a moderator's card with me. Most of the time I speak off the cuff. If I forget about anything important, people here in the front row will give me a signal. Yesterday we had a super exciting day. I think we had also brilliant weather. We could enjoy also this great location. Moreover, we heard and learned so lot about the ways in which entrepreneurs can use steward ownership to the benefit of themselves, but also of the society, and which legal entity is the right one to choose. We learned also so many people have come to realize and have also instilled enthusiasm to others. It is an idea that well beyond the legal entity as such can change the way in which business is done. That's why we want to shed more light on the political and societal side of steward ownership. Let's take a closer look at what on the one hand are the conditions set by politicians, what are the impulses, the drives that come from society. There will be an exciting panel debate. Yesterday, 1,500, well, here in this room we had 500 people. 1,500 people followed us on the live stream, which was a super exciting figure to hear. We also had a visual assistance by our graphic reporter, Franziska Runau. And we are going to see the pictures right away, just to capture once again what was on our minds yesterday. On the one hand, we learned from academia, from startups, from small and medium enterprises, but also from huge corporations, how steward ownership has been implemented already. What's the latest news, the state of the art from academia? We heard some signals from the fields of politics and journalism. We went further down the road to donut economy. What has responsibility, ownership, and sustainability and donut economy to do with each other? Is it the same thing? That was the topic in the workshop I attended. We learned about the principle and we understood the principles of steward ownership. It must be ensured that the organization belongs to itself, and on the other hand, also the lock-in of assets must be ensured. So much on that. Maike Kaufmann, Armin, Steuernagel. Well, we enjoyed them yesterday. Armin is going to walk us through part of this program together with me. Before we address the details, we will not throw around balls. I would ask you to move slightly forward so that with the edge of your buttocks you are sitting on the edge of the seat. And then, if you want, you may close your eyes. I will do the same. 1 minute, although I have to take the time. Please breathe in deeply. Let the air flow in and out. Try to tone down. There are so many people flocking together. You had some chats. You had probably also a chance to grab a cup of coffee. You may also move slightly your shoulders. Please breathe in, breathe out. Enjoy the silence. Now you may slowly open your eyes. If you want, you may look around, you may stretch your arms and legs. I see this. And please be present right now in bone and flesh, so that we can address the second. Steward ownership as a building block of an independent and a permanent and enduring business culture. This is the first session. How can steward ownership be a building block from a legal standpoint, from a political standpoint? What are the measures that need to be taken to ensure this? To what extent will independence and steward ownership contribute to shaping society as a whole? I briefly touched upon this. In our company, it's utterly important. To that end, steward ownership was the right legal entity to choose. We are going to discuss this at greater length. We will learn from other entrepreneurs on the one hand. On the other hand, we will also hear from them what their philosophical thoughts about this problem are. Later on, we will address the political level of steward ownership, which is certainly a major milestone. That steward ownership has been enshrined in the coalition agreement of the federal government. So the plan is to implement this project for good. We will hear from politicians what is the state of the art and the status quo. We have an important topic, which is time. Timing with politicians is very straight and strict. Please keep your eyes on your watch. Be punctual, be back, because otherwise these politicians are going to talk, but not in front of you, but in front of an empty audience. Please, as soon as you hear the gong, hurry up and get your act together to join us here. In the third session, we will look at social aspects, social innovation of steward ownership and the economical perspective or impact. After that, there will be the lunch break, followed by workshops. We will meet again in the afternoon and will bring this day to a close. Which is also important is that you enter into direct discussions with each other. Now, the first input. We are going to listen more about the importance of independence for companies and the economy by Peter Kowalsky, founder of Bionade. It may come as a surprise what he's going to tell us about independence and entrepreneurship, how they go together and how they are also a painful experience. Peter, Stefan, it was your brother. Peter, I would now ask you to join me on the floor. Wonderful. You may fire away. Okay, I will be back. Can you hear me? Good morning. So, I'm going to deliver a speech from my experience. It was about how we gave birth to Bionade and all that has happened in the following 25 years. Why is it important? Why is innovative power so important? Why do we need entrepreneurs or companies with agency? I come from Bavaria. I am a brewing engineer. I have been living here in Berlin for 8 years now. The starting point was, we ran a small brewery in the region, Hessian region of Rhön, in a very bad situation, financial situation. My mother had inherited it in a very shaky condition. We didn't want to close it down altogether. we wanted to develop for the next generations a business model that would be sustainable. Therefore, we came up with the idea of a brewed lemonade. And we thought, well, it's a good fit for the times we are living in. We didn't want to go it alone. We wanted something like a regional idea as a basic concept. We wanted to join hands with so many small breweries. We wanted to develop a sort of franchise concept. So this idea took almost 10 years before it became implemented, because we worked about the nitty-gritty detail and the inner workings for a long time before we went out to suggest it to other breweries. After 10 years, we finally pulled it off. Bionade could be produced in a repeatable way, in a standardized way, and then we thought we would have to find someone who would enter into an alliance with us, but we neglected the brewery, and we had spent so much money on the design and development of the lemonade, only to realize that 10 years afterwards, not a single other brewery was willing to enter into an alliance with us, which was a nasty situation. We were heavily indebted, 3.5 million Deutsche Marks in debts. There was no BAL agreement or regulation, no rating. You just had to talk to the CEO of your bank. So we started out. Then we tried to give birth to the idea of a healthy lemonade for children. So the problem is obvious. We need a distributing partner. So we finally found a distribution partner. It was a well-known company at a distance of about 60 kilometers from our seat. We had been in exchange continuously because we also sold their mineral water to our clients. So it was a friendly company. Well, you are a brewery. They told us, okay, we cannot do anything. And then we said, why don't we set up a new company? Let's establish a new company, and we will take out a share, and you will get a loan. And then we said, if that's the only possibility, we'll go that way. Unfortunately, on the very day in which we traveled, went to the notary public, when they would receive 40%, we 60%, supplier of the brewery filed for bankruptcy at the local court. Unfortunately, he was the best friend of the owner of the mineral water company. I try to forget about all the names. If I have a slip of the tongue and utter any name, these are wrong names, so forget them. So we were sitting in the Egon. We were sitting in the office of the notary public. Egon told me, I've just rang him up. We are not going to do this with a 40-60, but we will get 51% and you will get 49% for a loan. Then we said, but that was not agreed. Then he said, okay, let's abolish the whole project. There were three of us, my brother, I, myself, and our mother said, okay, let's do it that way. So we left the notary public's office and did 180,000 Deutschmarks of loan, and we were the owners of 49% of the stakes in this newly established company. Bionade grew well. The company with which we had entered into a distribution alliance couldn't pull it off. Bionade, however, went with very great success. So we sold in substantial quantities, and the distribution partner was happy. We said, Egon, well, we have paid back the loan. What about your share? And he said, let's continue working together. We knew Egon well. If Egon says we will pull it off, we will do so. Bionade grew and it became as big as Fanta. We had paid off all our debts. As a brewery, we had decent company cars. For the very first time, we paid a salary to ourselves. Something happened totally unexpected. Egon went bankrupt. Egon filed for bankruptcy. And we said, well, a certain Manfred, only first name, Manfred presented himself as risk manager of the banks. And he said he is the sole interlocutor. And Manfred told him, Peter, let me tell you right away, it's our objective to sell off this stake to rehabilitate the entire company's indebtedness. Great, we are going to buy it out. We will buy this share. Manfred said, well, send me your offer. We had a good friend with Deloitte, and we submitted a good offer, 10 million euros. And Manfred said, we need not 10 million. He said, we need 100 million Deutschmarks. Well, who is willing to pay 100 million Deutschmarks for something that's worth 10 million? Oh, very easy. Let's just increase the prices. What? Increase the prices? Well, then he's presented this idea. The banks had the idea to carry out a price increase by 30% year on year. We sold about 200 million bottles. A 30% price increase would have increased our revenue 10 cents more per year, so 20 million Deutschmarks per year. That would be 100 million if he sells it. And I told him, these are no longer 200 million bottles sold if we increase the prices, the purchase prices by 30%. It's idiocy. I hope that there are not so many bankers here today. Well, they came forward with a joint analysis. They ran a test in Freiburg. How many customers would pay the increased price? Half of the customers would pay the increased price. And so they decided with 51% of voting rights that they would push this through. Unfortunately, from 200 million bottles, we plummeted to 80 million bottles in 1 month. So in 1 month, we went down to 1/3 of our annual turnover, 100 million. Well, they had gone through the chimney. So this idea to sell the same product at a 30% higher price. So then they came up with the following idea, but I understood it only afterwards. They said, okay, if we cannot get this amount for 51%, we will be looking for a partner who pays this price that we desire for all the assets. They enacted some mechanisms, and the new interested party to who we were also presented, a new partner, and they wanted us to sell 70% of our assets, so as to enable this deal. And we said, we are not nuts. Then the banker, Manfred, said, we anticipated this, but well, you are the managers in this distribution partner. With this attitude, you put this sheer existence of this distribution company at risk. So we have the right to no longer invoice you, but you have the right to deliver your products. And we said, that's utter bullshit. What is that bullshit? We received mails, letters every day, and the appointed clerk of the court came up again and again, and they managed us. Then they said, okay, 70%, that's a fantastic idea. Let's do it. Which was at the beginning with a new partner, who was quite an idiot. This start, an idiotic start. What did it mean? So I do not know. This here was the company. They were the owners of this mineral water company, 51%, 49%. We owned the patents. We were responsible for the filling. We owned the rights for the international distribution, apart from Germany. The new partner said, okay, 70%, 70% of those assets that I have encircled here. That's how we slipped into this new partnership. We said, it's great, yeah, let's do it. It's super. And for a very long time, we discussed with this company on how to get Bionade out of the doldrums. Bionade had an image problem. We didn't generate any major sales, so the whole business model was down. How can we get Bionade into going again? We differed. We were at odds with each other. What about advertising commercials? We had on RTL2 a Bionade spot with Kemper. We said, well, let's abolish PT bottles. So these were two worlds that could not be reconciled. Not worlds, cultures, a clash of cultures. These two cultures were not a good fit. So we said, okay, there's no good joint strategy. We will suggest another strategy. Our idea is you get out of the whole company. We will transform Bionade into a cooperative in the ownership of the clients. You will get the money out. We talked with the DZ Bank. The whole concept was worked out in great deal. This other corporation told us we are going to think it over. We will get back to you. After 1 week, they got back to us and said, we won't do that, but we have a new idea. You go. We said, we will not go out of our own company. And they said, no, you must go. You must exit your company. Now everything that we have financed is in debt capital, and we decide now the transformation in stock. We had 30 million of indebtedness. If you cannot pay out 9 million, you have to go. So we somehow managed to realize it. 3 weeks afterwards, we had exited our own company. We received practically nothing in return. First, they didn't want to give us anything because it was worth nothing. We said, if we do not get anything, we have the worst and the most vicious PR agency that we can find. And then they said, okay, you will get something. My brother and together we received 3 million euros. My mother didn't get a thing. My stepfather, who was the holder of some patents, sold them. So we exited our own company. What I found so interesting, Bionade had to go. The corporation sold off this product, and the soul left the company together with us. So that was a quick run-through of those 25 years. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take your questions. it's a painful story to hear. Yes, it was really idiotic. It was a nasty feeling. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time. I'm not going to ask you about the pains. You may ask him directly in the break. But among other things, you also signed this petition for the creation of this new legal entity called Verantwortungseigentum, Steward-Ownership. Well, what prompted you to do so? Well, what I realized was that independence, or let me rather put it like this, agency, the power to act, are the main drivers to stay creative and innovative, to stay this course that prompted you to set up this company. This impotence, this loss of agency. We were totally lost. And you need to counter this feeling of utter impotence. And well, the normal or investors are not interested in long-term ideas that quite often are not reconcilable with entrepreneurship. We must stem this tide. And that's what I would call agency. That's why I like steward-ownership. Would you set up Bionade in steward-ownership? Yes, of course. Very good, very good. Thank you very much. Independence, yes, it is somehow important. It does matter. This feeling somebody is interfering with your own organization. He encroaches on your territory. You have spent so much passion, family, energy, time of your life, and what does it feel like? Somebody from outside comes. Let's do it totally differently. And Peter told us a very graphic example what it feels like. I'm now going to talk to Jürgen Kaube. Jürgen Kaube is one of the chief editors of Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Again, we are going to discuss this concept of independence of this organization, FAZ, the leading, one of the leading German newspapers. The legal independence as an element of steward ownership. How much is it exposed to pressure, especially in the times we are living in? What can one do to counter this dynamics? That's why I would ask Jürgen Kaube to join me on the floor. Let's have a nice chat together.
Hello. Right side, left side. It's nice to meet you. Hello. The microphone is off. Why is independence important in journalism? Hello? Okay, now you can hear me. Why is independence in journalism? Which, on the one hand, it's a question that is really clear. But why is independence so important in your field? If you want to put it in a negative light, because there is so much doubt around journalistic products. If people hear something on the radio or read the newspapers, they doubt if everything is truthful that they see or hear. And that's why it's important that we can clear out these suspicions that we are the that we just represent opinions of certain parties. We develop our own ideas. So we need to clear out that image, that wrongful image of journalism. If people think that we do what we do to serve obscure purposes, And what would you say? Independence in journalism, is there more pressure on this? Has this changed over time? What's changed is that print media, in regards of print media, competition has risen with the internet. And maybe also in general, attention is more diversified now, so print media, the numbers of print media have really decreased. Compensating this loss by building an audience online was a really slow process in the beginning. You all know that. Early on, it seemed to be just a free space and everybody was just giving things away, and they thought reach and advertisement would be the important pillars. But then Google said, well, yeah, no, we don't really need you for advertisement. And that really increased the economic pressure on newspapers and magazines. They are different than public television and cannot simply have levies or taxes and be funded this way. And that's also not something that we want. We don't want to be publicly funded, because then again, our independence would be in question. We would be supervised by certain boards. So we are all in favor of privatization in our company, but in the last 20 years, economic questions have really increased. How we can persist, how subscription numbers are decreasing, and the younger generations have to be attracted to reading newspapers. And what's your solution at FAZ? If we found a solution. Okay, so let's put it this way. How are things going? We moved away from the idea that you can give things away online for free. Now it's not for free anymore. We charge, we don't charge much, but still we charge. We have smaller subscription packages, which we hope then develop into bigger subscription packages. And we reach an audience which we never would reach with print media. Newspapers don't have a smaller readership. I don't know what the traffic on our websites is, but it's millions of users. And dealing with that cautiously is our strategy, basically. We stick with print. We continue to have revenue from that, significant revenue. From the perspective of the editors, we still focus on print media first. We don't use the approach like the New York Times, for example, who focus on online media first, and then they have, as an afterthought, print media. We do not use that same approach yet. And the focus on the internet and online media, how to approach this, how to enrich the texts with pictures and headlines and so on, that's really become very, very important. And that's why one of the main factors is the time span. We don't meet at 11 in the morning and finish at 5 in the afternoon. Basically, we almost work 24 hours, obviously. At 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not as much traffic on our site as at other times, but still there's a lot of traffic throughout the day. We have to react more quickly. We can't say, that person will still be dead tomorrow, so we can then report on it. Historically, somebody said that at some point, but we still have to release the obituary early on. And how did you secure your independence legally? Well, if steward-ownership, if there's the question of legal form for stewardship, we are a private limited company that is linked to a foundation, the foundation Fazit, which only serves one purpose, which is making the newspaper happen. Therefore, the foundation doesn't take out a lot of money from the company, from our profits, when we have profits, which has been the case since 2015. Shareholders of this foundation are very partially the editors. I can't even tell you the number. Don't ask me about it. It's really insignificant. I think it's 2% or 2.5% or something like that. To put it simply, that's not important for me. If we have losses, I have to act. But right now, we're doing well, and we can enjoy that we're doing well. We only have this foundation and their shares as a legal construct. My successor would have to go to a notary as well, and then become a shareholder. So that's the construct that secures your independence, yes. We have a very weird organigram if you compare it to other newspapers. Our independence goes beyond the question of ownership. We have 4 editors for certain areas of the newspaper. Among ourselves, we operate independently, completely independently. We hardly ever discuss texts within the circle of editors. That's very, very rare. I'm the editor of Science and Travel and Culture, and I don't hear any inside information about what's happened in the political realm, for example. I only have the same input as you have. I read it in the evening on my iPad. I don't ask prior. I don't have that information at hand prior. I could look it up in our system, but I don't have the time to do that. And quite frankly, I'm lacking curiosity as well. Yeah, and I'll know later on. Yeah, there'll be that tomorrow as well, right? Yeah. So that means internally we also have very clear independence among the various areas. And I'd even say that goes even further in the organization. In the area culture, I think I have around 40 or 50 editors that work for me. That's what's not commonplace for us is that even there, I'm not always so close to their work. They work, and I can't always be there supervising all the time, each and every one of them. Quality assurance happens already in the recruitment process, basically by the selection of our employees. So I let them do their work. So, how many managers do you have? Yeah, formally we have some departmental heads. Some of them are only managing themselves. And it's very hard to manage yourself, right? Yeah, to make yourself work and be orderly is sometimes harder than doing that to other people. If we take it serious, that level of management, I'd say we have 3 levels of hierarchy. There's editors, there is heads of departments, and then there are the editors, and that's it. Great. Talking about critical infrastructure, I want to ask you one last question. What would you say? Besides journalism, what is other critical infrastructure? We only have journalists here today, I hope. Yeah, me too. What kind of critical infrastructure is also affected by this, and what, when it comes to independence, or does this apply to all organizations? Well, in principle, yes, it applies to all legal forms of companies. I can imagine that there are some areas or fields in society or economics that might be more susceptible to losing that independence. That's just a gut feeling of mine. I feel that these are fields in which the effectiveness is not secured by technology. Journalism is a field that doesn't use much technology. We communicate with our laptops or our pencils, and then that's basically it. Distribution, of course, has technology. and the publishing house as well. But the editing house, the editors, don't use much technology. There are some areas of society in which technology is not at the forefront. Schools would be one example. They have a technology deficit, as it's been put. If that wasn't the case, education would work differently. They don't have that technology. Medicine is a similar area where technology plays a role, but the client also plays a role. The client, the patient, has to cooperate, otherwise there is no healing. The legal realm might also fall into this category. Think of 10,000 of attorneys. That would be kind of production side, a factory. But if you think of smaller law firms, they don't use much technology. They depend greatly also on their clients. So I could imagine that this could be an interesting field. What kind of legal forms are used in what fields, and especially in fields that don't use much technology and depend greatly on their clients. Yeah, and in the legal realm, there's these partnerships models, for example, which are not that far from what we're talking about. Yeah, and in medicine, you see the same. You see associations of GPs that join and form a practice. Yeah, we are a bit late, but one last question. Is there somebody that you can think of who doesn't really like that foundation model that you're using in your organization? Well, for the leaders, it's a bit challenging. Not so much the foundation model, but the editing model. We don't have one editor who has one owner and could always ask that question, what should be done? For us, in our case, it's 4. So that makes things more complicated. And an economist will probably have learned it differently. Independence has its cost, as the economists would probably say, or it has a price tag, as you could say. You'd have to know that prior if you wanted to found a media company and if you wanted to use our structure. You have to know that it's not all easy and that there are things that need to be discussed. The normal model, the pyramid model, the benefits of that normal model you wouldn't reap. But maybe it brings you different advantages, like the quality of your end product. Yes, I hope that's what our newspaper stands for. Thank you so much. Jürgen Kaube from FAZ. You might still have a chance to talk to him outside later on. Now, let's get into the next part, which is the political frameworks of steward ownership. Now we have that time issue. Oh, seems there's no problem after all. But I'm thinking of the right part, correct? Yes. Okay, otherwise I would get Mr. Kaube back on stage. Okay, so now we are reaching the block of political frameworks for steward ownership. Now we want to look at the political conditions for the legal form of steward ownership. What's the status quo of the process? I will ask Armin Steuernagel to the stage and he will kind of take over from here. He will have an interview with the policymakers we invited today, and one after the other, they will have a conversation and we will learn about the process.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. From my part, this has been extremely exciting how the FAZ, operates a sort of foundation model, but something similar, naked and naked in, naked out. An editor goes to the notary public, but exits then also naked the office, so he does not get any profit from the setting up. Before we welcome the three-party governing governors, Ricarda Lang, Johannes Vogel, the parliamentary secretary of and Verena Hubertz from the SPD, and Ricarda Lang from Alliance 90 and the Greens. Let me briefly wrap up in what about legal entities or the legal structures so that we can enter into them. Most of you will know it, but it's probably a good thing to wrap it up once again. Yesterday, we took so many beautiful detours about this steward-ownership topic. With the FAZ, it was a nice detour. How could you combine steward ownership with a foundation? Gerhard Belis of Ableton told us yesterday about a double foundation model. He mentioned it also briefly. It's extremely expensive. As of now, it costs a triple-digit amount. Now about the direct road, how can we implement steward ownership? In practical terms, I need to give a quick answer. Why do we want to implement it right away? Why do we want a legal entity of its own? Well, the answer to this conundrum is easy because the veil that we wear as an entrepreneur, they were tailored at a time when there was a totally different understanding of entrepreneurship. It was, they tailored suits and black suits and to be worn with a tie and frocks and so on. And we had frocks with cylinder hats from the last century. With it, we brought this very graphically across. We dressed up in old costumes to highlight from Michael Otto to Christoph Bosch. Well, the heirs of those companies. We need new clothes. We need a new clothes in the sense of a new legal entity that implements all those beautiful things that we have been discussing for the last 2 days. Then the question arose, why not a foundation? The FAZ does have a foundation. Why do you complain? Well, a foundation in effect does implement. It's an absolute division of the assets from those who manage these assets. So it's similar to steward ownership, but there is a completely other element. The foundation has a founder, a donor that perpetuates this purpose. Normally, the foundation comes with a view at eternity. It wants to be something permanent. I, the founder, know better for the next 100 years. My dead hand will rule over this institution. The governance will be the same. It cannot be changed. That's the basic principle of foundations. Therefore, the assets of the foundation must be locked into this. Things that are totally alien to entrepreneurial activities, because the assets of a company must be able to shrink and grow again in certain times. So there are so many other obstacles. Fortunately enough, the Federal Ministry of Justice shares our view, so foundation is not a good model. The same is true for cooperatives. But again, this lock-in principle, the naked in, naked out, you cannot withdraw any money, but that's not insured in the cooperative, because a cooperative is made up by the joint will of a group of people, and they want to act on their own. They want to draw some benefit. They want to extract dividends from the cooperative. In theory, they could even sell the cooperative. So the lock-in principle is not insured. That's why we came together and drew the conclusion we need a new legal entity. We asked the Allensbach Institute to carry out a survey. We asked about more than 2,000 companies. Do you agree that we need a new legal entity? Well, we had an extreme uproar of outrage. They told us, you are nuts. Do you want to abolish entrepreneurship altogether? Because, of course, entrepreneurship means also that you own the enterprise totally. That's why we ask the family owners, the family-run companies, and we saw a broad majority is in favor of introducing a new legal entity. What does the new legal entity? Well, it wants to ensure in a legally binding way that the recipient, let's see the company as a sort of vase, that the content of this recipient, that this cannot be extracted by the owners. It's 100% lock-in of the assets. That is the one thing that we try to ensure. The second criterion is my assets, that are my stakes, cannot be inherited, but they will fall back into the ownership of the company. Even if I dispose of them, they will always be sold at nominal value, so no speculative profits can be achieved. We have written it down, the capital lock. So the assets are locked in. You cannot say, okay, we will discuss this with the politicians in a while, because it's legalese for the legal profession. It's a conundrum. How can you ensure that you cannot dispose of this capital? But that's the core pledge. I do not have to elaborate on this. I think we described this at great length. The transfer of those shares that you own in this new legal entity, these are voting rights at nominal value. No transfer of voting rights is possible, or only at nominal value. So to exclude that somebody exploits the company, we need certain warranties. We have copied them from the law of cooperatives. We need a certain supervisory agency. We can discuss this in greater detail in the workshop about the new legal entity. There will be 2 sessions dedicated to it, 2 workshops in the afternoon. We are extremely grateful to a number of professors under the leadership of Professor Anne Sanders, who joined us yesterday also, share and our view and translated this into a new legal form, a legal entity, a mix in the we do not have to link up with the private limited company law, but we need a new chapter, not as a subchapter of the private limited company, GmbH. Thanks to you, thanks to the massive support, thanks to the bundling effect of our voices, we have been listened to by politicians. Before the coalition agreement, we talked to major politicians who have now joined also leadership positions. We have also these 2 statements among the corporate culture includes new forms such as social enterprises or the steward-ownership with capital. We want to create a new appropriate legal basis for companies with capital lock. The Ministry of Justice is working out some draft bills. It's a very challenging time. This afternoon there will be a representative from the Federal Ministry of Justice to whom we can talk. But the main challenge, and I think that it is safe to say, even here in the public sphere, they have enormous difficulties to grant this, that we will get a new legal form where we have a capital lock which is enshrined in this legal format. But then you said it must be possible to dissolve this. For example, the editors can jointly also extract all the capital from the FAZ. So it's not credible. But we want a 100% safety that there is this absolute lock-in of capital. That's why I'm so happy to be able to delve into the political discussion. First the politicians, then Sven Giegold, a representative, the one lady of the Social Democrats, SPD, who best knows about our demands, is one of the founder of Kitchen Stories. Funnily enough, she exited to company in Steward-Ownership, to Bosch, Verena, Hubertz. I'm excited. Please join me on the floor. First of all, the floor is yours, and then we can also discuss in a private chat. Good morning also from my end. I was thinking hard where to start with all the problems and challenges that we are faced with in this country. In 2013, I set up a start-up on a yellow envelope. We, as Social Democrats, come from the world of cooperatives. I wanted to have my employees as partners, so that I'm not the only one to go through crisis. Whoever has delved into this conundrum knows how complex it is, because it's not enshrined in our legal system that many people share the responsibility for an entire company. And I think it's time for a new legal form. More than 120 years, there has been no introduction of a new legal entity. But times have changed fundamentally, and that's the idea that companies must also weather the storms of the future for ages, and that's why we support this. We, as the parliamentary group of the Social Democrats, it does make sense for new companies that are set up. It should be possible to use this. You do not have to think whether you have to set up a shell, an outer shell in the sense of a foundation. I'm proud that we have gone down this road despite all the difficulties, but also the family-run enterprises is a very important aspect because, well, I realized I studied business administration, MBA. I have also fellow students who come from family companies. Again and again, the new generations must ask themselves, now the shares are somehow diluted. What about the statutes, about the bylaws? How can we ensure that the son of the family does not just relish the assets in a yacht on the Bahamas? How can we ensure that this asset stays within the family, but also, well, you will always receive offers, bids. Companies can be bought out. Do we want to open the door? Speculators buying up, for example, a medical office in Ostwestphalia, both from the capitals and also from the rural regions. That's why we need to enshrine this in a watertight manner. Armin, you depicted this very graphically. We talked a great deal about this because my way from the startup that by the end of 2020 I had to leave to join the fray of politics. It's not possible that A policies is so slow trundling along in a very annoying and also well, we were trundling a bit around 13% of the votes. I have been a member of the Social Democrats. My father is a locksmith, and my mother had studied theology. So after my business administration degree, I decided to set up kitchen stores. I never had dreamed that it would be a great company, but we have 70 employees by now. In 2020, I left the company. 2017, Bosch entered, and that's why we have a foundation as the ultimate owner of kitchen stores. I lost stakes due to the fact that I became a politician. We have so many different models from Westing and Co. But I do not want to be guided by the idea, how can I make most money from an exit? Rather, I said, in times where we need to wonder, how can we hammer out social and also sustainable solutions to make this country more innovative, then I went from Berlin to Trier, and I snatched the direct mandate from the CDU after 19 years, and I am now responsible for economic policy in the Bundestag, and I'm happy to start an exchange with you. Verena, thank you so much. This has been a very inspiring story, probably inspiring also for entrepreneurs, probably to change sides from the world of business to the world of politics. I think it would be a good thing if others followed your model. You are a member of the Social Democrats. Is there anything social democratic in the idea of steward-ownership? Definitely, because it's deeply ingrained in our DNA that we as Social Democrats want to share responsibility, share ownership. If you look into the gap, it's most of the times your family origin that determines your professional careers. Some people sit in the office as white-collar workers, other blue-collar workers. But do you have an equitable share? Well, not at all. Most of the times, well, just the happy few will cash in billions and billions of dividends, while others well, I must say it's a very, very close fit for Social Democrats, which is good news for me. But I would dare to say, based on this focus on equal opportunities, being independent of financial background, you can also enter such a company independent of whether you inherit anything. It's important not to buy in at a high value, but at a nominal value, 20, for example, 1,000 euros, naked in, naked out, similar to cooperative, where your share. And everybody has the same voting right. Those who have 10 shares do not have 10 votes. I think this is interesting. I do not know about you in the audience. Well, our surveys told us or gave us a feeling with the fellow entrepreneurs of flexibility, especially in the act of setting up a company, should also foresee this possibility of have an unequal sharing of voting rights. Coming back to this principle of naked in, naked out, it does work only with a very strong capital lock. It's not so you have the capital lock. What's your view on this? Can you tell us, can you exude some confidence? How can you nudge the rather hesitant Federal Ministry of Justice to go down this road? Can you nudge them forward? Because, well, we have explained this in great detail 100 times, why we need this absolute lock-in of capital. But I'm not a lawyer myself. I'm not a legal expert. Why is it so difficult? It's a conundrum. It's a headache. If there isn't a strong political will to hammer this out, it will never be pulled off. What do you say to that? Well, it's absolutely crucial. It's instrumental. We need to enable an entrance, even if I give it away for free. The employee must pay taxes on this profit from a disposal. Let's say 10 million, you get 10%. You would have to include in your tax return this 10, let's say 10%. You would have to pay 10% on 10 millions management buy-in. You would have to carry out this management buy-in. So you need capital. But that's bullshit, because we do not want your money, but we want you as a person. So it's absolutely crucial to have this absolute capital lock-in. On the brief us about the process. We haven't told the story yet. How does it work? Well, everything is much slower than you thought, but at times it goes for it at breakneck speed. LNG terminals are hammered out in 1 week or 2. But things that need a long-term perspective need that Sven Giegold from the ministry at the end of the day. These are just authorities, public offices with so many officials. They are highly committed. Well, they do not close the door and leave the office at 5 in the afternoon. Well, so much is going on. The support to be paid to the companies. So for the very first time, we have the startup premiums. I remember Minister Altmaier, when he first talked about this, the only thing that he came into his mind was the Dyson Hoover craft, or the startup strategy was developed. We are discussing social entrepreneurship. We are in favor of social entrepreneurship funding, and also orphaned assets. But this new legal entity must be pushed forward. For 5 weeks, or briefly before the summer break, we presented the startup strategy. Now it's about implementation. And yes, of course, you need to exercise political pressure. Is it due to capacity, or is it rather in the fine-tuning of certain disagreements? The technical experts, the politicians. We have also rapporteurs in every parliamentary group for the startup. Kevin Kühnert, Lars Kleinbeil, Olaf Scholz would be well placed, also very well placed on this slide. But the idea must stay as it is. Well, we all realize the political process will never give you everything that you demand. But the problem with the lock-in of capital is a 95% lock-in of capital is not a capital lock-in. It's an either-or, 0 or no, or 1. From the audience, any questions to Verena? Hubertz? Now would be the right moment to do so. Otherwise, well, I would ask a question myself. So I see you are deeply impressed. Microphone? Apparently that's not the case. So, quick question. Ulrich Watermann is my name. Do you have a timeline that you could briefly sketch out where you would say, okay, this timeline is a realistic one to implement this new legislation? Or would you rather say, oh, we are treading on thin ice? Probably we would have to ask Sven Giegold afterwards. It wouldn't be a valid statement. I think I guess that next year we will move forward. Well, some things cost a lot of money. Here it doesn't cost you anything. It's just about hammering out a good draft bill. A legislature is over 1 year after the last national elections. We are now in September, although so many other topics are on the desk of the Federal Minister of Justice. The tenants protection, Kevin Kühnert. We have also presented a draft bill for new tenant protection for rented protection. It's not just the walled pockets that should on you. Well, there were some attempts. Well, the first tool did not work because it was abused for tax evasion. So let's hope we will have a substantial step forward. Johannes Vogel is with us from the immediate office of Marco Buschmann, the Federal Minister of Justice. He will brief us on what can be implemented. Yes, these are very challenging times. We have urgent topics and also challenging topics. Nice wording. In conclusion, we have so many entrepreneurs in the room that, like you, have set up a company. Any last message to us? You have gone the full road, and with Bosch, you have exited your company and have left it in safe hands. Many people here do set up their company with Steward-Ownership. Any final message? Well, we need you. We need people deeply committed, not because they want to have buckets full of dollars. The commitment to have it enshrined in a legally binding legal entity is so valuable. Continue. Keep it rolling. If you have any topics, feel free to address us, to get into contact. We have been elected not to represent our own interests, but yours. Thank you very much.
All right, and now the next guest on stage. So I am looking forward to welcome to the stage from the FDP, the vice whip of the FDP, Johannes Vogel, who's familiar with this topic, and he also included some phrases in his election campaign. Thank you so much for being here. The stage is yours. And we will have a chat in a few minutes, and now you can talk as you please. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's all very close because the state president of Israel was just in the federal parliament this morning. That's why I'm dressed so nicely today. So it's great that you were so flexible. Let's get right into our chat, but I will just say one or two sentences. Armin and I have been in contact on this topic for many years. Personal friends of mine like Verena and others have approached me with this topic, and I'm simply convinced. It's that simple. As a liberal, I think that first, when it comes to the question of legal forms, we need innovation as well, and we're ready to try something new, and that is valuable in itself. And then, secondly, when it comes to ownership, if we keep up that topic, but provide different options between generations, for example, or different people who to benefit from the value of a company and to divide this in a more modern way is totally a good idea. And I haven't met anyone so far who has told me that companies in steward-ownership, like Bosch or like we see so many in Denmark, are something bad. Quite the opposite. A state that makes this easy has to simplify these constructs in the 21st century, and I think this is possible, and that's why I've fought for it in the FDP's election campaign and also in the negotiations for the coalition agreement, and I'm looking forward to the further work we will do in this legislation period. Thank you so much. Yes, one thing I am interested in. Thank you for pouring me a glass of water, but maybe we can get another glass for the next one. One thing I would like to know. You come from the liberal perspective. You put a focus on innovation. You want certain freedoms. Is this legal form actually a liberal legal form? It's a profoundly liberal idea, as Lars Feld has written once, but he's not a party member. Unfortunately, that was going to be my punchline. Yes, Lars Feld is no member of the FDP, but as a liberal and member of the Free Democrats, I would say that liberal economic policy making has to be shaped by smart heads like Lars Feld as well. And if he says it's a liberal project, who would want to contradict him? I wouldn't need his opinion to arrive at the same conclusion, but I think it's a better argument. The critics that I am aware of in my personal life, my friends, you probably find more friends of the private limited company. They are often family-owned businesses, have family-owned businesses that pass on the business from generation to generation. But that's where the criticism comes in. That's where we encounter resistance. And I'm very familiar with it because I live in Berlin in an urban area, but my area of election, my electorate, is in a very rural area. And that's where we see the family businesses that have been passed on for hundreds of years. The feeling that I have is that in most cases, there's just a big misunderstanding what steward ownership means. Some in our country take this the wrong way, as if they wouldn't no longer have responsibility. And that's why I'm so happy that you as an initiative have reacted to it and have thought about changing the name. At some point, the political debate has to go beyond that initial misunderstanding. We have to solve problems and improve things. And we don't have unlimited time for this. Yeah, you've mentioned the family-run businesses also in your electorate. But what we know from statistics as well as from experiences in your electorate is that very, very often, less than 50% of family-owned businesses can be passed on to the next generation. What can you do instead? You can sell, but maybe you don't want to sell. And steward ownership could be a solution in these cases. I heard that yesterday from somebody representing a mid-sized company here, saying that I would like to pass on my company to my employees without them having to invest a lot of initial capital. Isn't that a profoundly liberal idea? To be able to enter a company without being related. Isn't it similar to Marco Buschmann's idea of that responsibility community or steward community? Isn't that similar to steward ownership? In his idea, they rethink family and what it means, and we do the same in this context. Yes, totally. Let me just add a couple of thoughts. First of all, if that was the only reason why there are more and more constellations without blood-related inheritance, then that could already be a good reason to think of inventing a new legal form. But then secondly, also, I think taking on responsibility as an entrepreneur is profoundly liberal, and it's something that pushes our society forward. Ownership in itself is a profoundly liberal concept. And to modernize this in the 21st century is something that I find very inspiring. If I talk to people who are not so familiar with the topic, I always bring up Bosch as an example. Everybody likes Bosch and its contribution to society through its foundation. And now you can also give the FAZ as an example. Yes, that's right. I was going to say there are more examples than Bosch. How partnerships work in law firms and all of that, it's a construct that's already been around, a concept we're familiar with. It's just the structure of these organizations that's new, and maybe with the rise of startups we will see more of that. Usually what I'm left with is people then saying, well, we didn't need it so far, we haven't needed it. But that's not a convincing argument for me. That's a very conservative thought. We'll continue down the same road until we can't do so anymore. That's wrong. Let's take a leap forward because it's an opportunity. It's a chance. And the state, with its law-passing capability, can really help here to facilitate for people to take on entrepreneurial responsibility. Absolutely, and that's what we like to hear. These are reasons why the FDP, or these are the kind of important impetuses that the FDP continues to put in, like cutting red tape. You already mentioned that the arguments of family owners, of owners of family businesses, can easily be fought back, but another thing that hasn't been mentioned that yet is the legal perspective. From a legal perspective, we can say that corporate law simply works that way. You have shareholders and they can take out as much as they want. So from a legal perspective, it's a really strange thought to have an asset lock. But for us, it's an essential criteria to go into that direction. So my question is, I think it's great that you say we need innovation, we need to fight the arguments and have discussions. For us, we get that feedback from the Ministry of Justice. It's a nice thought and everything, and we like your fight for it, but from a legal standpoint, it's very difficult. That's what they say. And then there's me as a layman and just a citizen. And that gives me the impression that at the end of the day, it all comes down to political will, doesn't it? Well, yeah, I'm also not a lawyer for corporate law or capital law. I'm just somebody has an opinion on it. But I'm one of the first people within my party to really drive this issue forward and to take a public stand on the topic. I've been dealing with the topic for a while, even before I was approached by Verena and others. Also by Mr. Giegold, for example, who will be here later on, as State Secretary for a while. And he is a great attorney. He's an excellent attorney. So it's not true that like all lawyers fight the idea and everybody who is not a lawyer is in favor of the idea. That's not the situation. And that in the political realm leads to constellations where we have justifiable questions, we have issues that have to be separated from the whole topic. I hear of worries about facilitating tax evasion with these new forms, these new constructs. But if I take a look at the issue, I think it's a complex topic, but it's something that's solvable. And that makes it politically viable for me. And I know you would like to hear me saying that I'm talking to the Ministry of Justice or that I can represent it. Unfortunately, that's not me. The only thing I know is that the government is looking into it, and I am certain we will find a solution because it is a topic that we can find a solution for. I see the political will to find a solution. We have it. We see it in the coalition agreement. We finally have a political majority in, as we have in other issues, and they lead to realization. Well, thank you. You are the parliamentary director. Yeah, it's not going to fail in Parliament, I can tell you that. That's great. Now, give us a last tip before you leave. We try to approach Michael Buschmann, your colleague from the party. We invited him to be here today. We invited him plenty of times. We want to have a talk with him because we all know it depends on his ministry. And you know him well. So, how can we make a meeting happen? Well, when you told me prior that you approached him dressed as Star Wars characters, and he's a huge Star Wars fan, I thought, well, I mean, your imagination is just endless. If you haven't managed it yet, even with this creativity, it probably just comes down to scheduling and timing. Don't underestimate or overestimate how much pressure is in our pipeline because of the challenges we're facing at the moment. We are revamping the infection law this week. This has so many consequences on freedoms, which are important for us as the Free Democrats. Yesterday, in our faction, we discussed this intensively. So there's so many topics we're dealing with and working on. I think Verena just put it nicely, and I totally concur with her, that we have to manage to, in spite of these incredible time pressures because of the urgent issues, that we don't only focus on the urgent issues. And why? Well, first off, it seems clear, yes, of course. But if you take a closer look, then you have to agree that the situation we're in is because this used to be the modus operandi of policymakers for so many years. Now, the energy crisis we're in right now is caused by Vladimir Putin and nobody else. But the fact that we as a country are not as well prepared as we could have been is because of policy making in the past, because of the energy dependency of Russia that was driven for years. And all of this goes back to us dealing with day-to-day policy making. And that was the attitude here in Berlin. And we didn't take to the bigger issues that were coming: climate change, digitalization, systemic changes. And we didn't look into these issues, and we didn't fight them or work on them early on, as we should have done, and we need to change this. And one trend is digitalization, using the chances, and we do so through entrepreneurship, and modern entrepreneurship needs modern legal forms, and we're working on it. Well, that's great to hear. We count on you to help us. Ricarda Lang is here. Okay, Lena is coming to the stage, so I think there will be a change. Thank you so much for being here, making the time to join us. Thank you so much. Keep on working.
Ja, okay.
Danke. Wir haben eine Planänderung.
There's a change of plan.
10 Minuten Pause.
We'll have our 10-minute break now. 10 minutes sharp. Please rush to the bathroom, get your coffee, and get right back into the room. Ricarda Lang will is late, so please hurry if it's urgent. Run for it, and then I'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Well then, please get back to your seats. So the agenda of top-ranking politicians is not my cup of tea, but it's almost very exciting here. Behind the scenes, we may now continue. The break is almost over. Nestle down in your seats now. Armin is going to welcome Ricarda Lang in a minute. She will be wired with the microphone, and we can follow the plan as soon as you are ready. I hope you are well and you could make best use of the break. If you are ready to go, we are too. So, good. Ricarda has been announced already. Ricarda, we are happy that you made it despite all the paraphernalia of this state visit by the Israeli president. And so you can take a rest and we can have a nice chat after your brief introduction. Yes, hello, dear friends. I am utterly sorry that I made you wait. I was on an errand for about 20 minutes to get a cab, looking at the last 20 years. Well, we had again and again discussions about the economy. When it was about Corona, which one takes first rank, health or the economy? When it was about gas embargoes, the economy, should we renounce due to the economic person to have a heavy-handed approach against a war criminal like Vladimir Putin? What I find, we talk about the economy as an abstract construct that has nothing to do with themselves. Business or economy that has nothing to do with their own safety in the way we live, the way we produce, how we move around, how we work, with workplaces of thousands and thousands of people. I think this is a somewhat reduced idea of the economy. We have an economic system that all too often is aligned to the short-term profit, to snatch as much money out of an idea, not hinged upon the purpose to implement good ideas in the best possible way. We, the Greens, enshrined this in our fundamental program. The economy serves humans. It's not humans that serve the economy. It's about creating an economic system that shapes the world of business in such a way that the end, for example, producing foodstuff, making life easier, better, bringing ecological innovations to life. This purpose of the economy must be at this of the economy. Sven Giegold, who has been one of the trailblazers, the idea of steward-ownership, for which you are up in arms for years, Armin. Some people here in the room have been promoting this for years. Not only has it been enshrined in our election manifesto, but has become also part and parcel of our coalition agreement. We need to find finally a legal form for this new Institute of Steward-Ownership. Also in this unimaginable war with Vladimir Putin, economic policy is also a question of democracy. I am deeply convinced only if we change our economy, only if we realize that the markets of the future must be climate neutral, that the markets of the future will be digitized, only then will we be able to stand the international competition, Silicon Valley capitalism, but also state capitalism in the Chinese manner. We will then, only then will we be able to resist the pressure from other blocs. Only if we have a social and an ecological economy. We need good ideas. We need good purposes and objectives. It's not just an operative system. Well, I can do anything I want with a steward ownership. Legal entity. No, we need more than good ideas. We also need a different logic. The logic that a company serves a purpose. A company serves not just an individual that happens to be the owner. Now the company is shouldered by so many individuals together. They shoulder the responsibility. Companies must serve the purpose for which they are set up, not the purpose of making a maximum of profits. I think this is also a shield against dumping wages, against this exploitative capitalism. We need to stand our chance also with a new operative system. Many of you are sitting here, many entrepreneurs, many of the entrepreneurs have embarked on this journey. And the best thing is, if the new operative system is geared to the new ideas and meets up with new ideas to bring forward climate protection, to launch new mobility concepts, to make the economy more equitable and more social. I think you are a sort of ideal lab for that. And now our purpose is, and our duty is to make this possible, not just by some fine-tuning, but by hammering out a new legal entity, and that you can feed in the new operative system for the new legal entity. In that way, we will be able to renovate our economy. We will increase our economic competitiveness. We will protect the climate, but we will also protect our democracy. I'm deeply convinced of that. Thank you very much, dear Ricarda. We've got a new glass for you, because Johannes almost was forced to drink from the same glass as Verena. Well, you talked from the bottom of our heart, especially the last point you made. It's not just the nitty-gritty details, some minor amendments. You are not the ministry that is competent for us. How can we imagine this, we entrepreneurs? How can we help this baby on its way to become a new legal institution? Well, of course, in a coalition, you have a division of labor. Then certain projects rest with one ministry, but it's not, well, I'm not interested in what you are doing. We have it in the coalition agreement, but just think up anything. Of course, you enter into discussions. If you have a draft bill, well, but the fundamentals should be clarified in advance. But also public pressure inside a coalition can make sure that you have the best possible interpretation of the coalition agreement. I must repeat it. I'm not a legal expert on the individual details of the European fiscal law, but what is important, apart from the legal certainty and guarantees, is the fact that it sends out a message. It's a signal. It's not just about some companies embarking on a different journey. No, it's also about sending a message, a political signal that we need. Even the trust in the population will grow. I mentioned it at the beginning. Many people think, well, companies are just made to generate profits. No, if we want to strengthen the idea of entrepreneurship, we need to launch this new idea. Of course, we do this in-house in our coalition, but also publicly, which is very rewarding for me, but on a personal note. When you heard for the first time about steward-ownership, what crossed your mind? What enthralled you? Any questions that popped up? When did you hear first about the steward-ownership? I heard first from Sven. You were among the first, and Sven's can be very stubborn when he comes up with good ideas. He told me about this. From the very start, I found this totally exciting, apart from all these details. What does it do to your assets? Marlene, I forgot the family. She was an heir from Austria. There was also Marlene Engelhorn. It was about the fiscal. I'm going to inherit so much money because my grandfather cashed in a lot of profit with his company. No, but the question is not just why should I inherit all these assets, but it was not just my grandfather. An incredible number of people have cooperated, employees. They produced this jointly. This is the one thing that enthralled me most and that kept me also worried. How can we democratize our business? Not that just one person deciding everything. We have legislation for the protection of labor, everything that the trade unions fight for. Who belongs the company to? That's the fundamental question. Your idea is part of the answer to that. And I found this fascinating. Marlene Engelhorn, by the way, also advocates this new form of steward ownership. Our time is almost up. Last question to you. Half of the people here are small and medium enterprises. Half of them are start-ups, and the rest of them is academics. Well, what's on your heart? We are in a situation where it's not easy to make the voice of climate protection. We are discussing endlessly the topic of energy safety. We are so weak, we are also vulnerable because we are in a deep dependency on Russian fossil energies. But the question, how can we react to future crises? This war will not be the last crisis. It may be the first in a series of crises. How do we react to future crises? It will always depend on whether we have an answer that is big enough to control this climate crisis. We will not avert the climate crisis altogether, but to make it controllable or to stand this. 1.5 degrees, this is a path. We need a government with an agency, we need society, we need the civil society, and we need enterprises that take the lead. And my request to myself, to our party, but also to you, don't let lose this objective of 1.5 degrees. That must be the main strategy of our political action. Thank you very much, Ricarda.
So, dann darf ich jetzt
Now it is my privilege to announce Sven Giegold, he's State Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Now let's take a concrete look at the perspective of a ministry, legal entity. What's the state of the art? Where are we? Sven Giegold, I would ask you right away to join me on the floor. Enjoy. Please don't leave us alone. Well, it's a huge pleasure to be here. It's great. It's so outstanding why this project has been confined to the basement. You could say steward ownership and the initiative of advocating is a sort of underground initiative that has flocked together here. But I was assured it was only due to budget restrictions. I find this an outstanding initiative to see so many interested entrepreneurs and so many friends. I tried to make the best of this. Without further ado, our ministry advocates and supports this legal entity, this new legal entity as in principle as you demand it. So best regards from Robert Habeck, and our boss Ricarda Lang has expressed it. We are the party that brought this into the coalition agreement. Now it's about time to implement it finally. And it's our responsibility to do so. And Let me state one thing quite clearly. This new legal entity must not make us neglect that there are so many other ways to act in a sustainable manner with the existing legal entities. It's not about glorifying or singing the high praise of just one legal entity, legal form. All the corporate entities have a responsibility, a social responsibility and social responsibility. In this context, we are very confident that the discussions about corporate sustainability due diligence guideline and also the directive and the corporate governance code that underlines this once again here in Germany. It's not about controlling capital-driven or profit-driven companies, leaving them out of the responsibility by creating a new legal entity. Nor would we intend that this new legal entity should serve primarily social and ecological purposes. No, it has a standing of its own, no matter what the object of the company is. Therefore, it is important to give a good reason why we need this. Since we are a ministry that advocates social, ecological, market economy, why we want this new form for these very reasons, it starts with a demand. There is a true demand for this new legal form of company. And it's normal that we stitch together a new suit, a new clothes for a new company format. We align this with a dynamically changing market environment. To put it flippantly, we enlarge our toolkit by one new model that does not exist as of now. Rather, we would ask, why hasn't it come into existence? Individualization and heterogeneity of our societies are reflected in the world of businesses and in different entrepreneurial responses. The further development of the legal entity creates further options for entrepreneurs to stand the competitive environment successfully. I see no convincing arguments, after years of debate, why the legislator has not yet given a satisfying answer to your clearly formulated demand for a new legal entity. And just this freedom to opt for a new form. This is not enough. There are so many other reasons that have to do with economic order as a whole, why it is in the general interest to follow your demand. Profit-oriented companies, this has been described in the literature repeatedly, that they are normally in a mindset that is short-term business. This economists have criticized this again and again. Whether this is always true, there are certainly many public companies that are not short-term minded. But, well, we have reporting duties for the capital markets, information asymmetries, incomplete incentives of management, immaterial assets that are not reflected in the price at the stock markets. Under these aspects, a lock-in capital company has a huge potential to act even successfully in a variety of different companies, because in its DNA it is geared and is programmed to be a long-term sustainable practice. Good conditions for resilience, for value creation, for thrifty use of resources, and for long-term investment. The last argument is so utterly important because it's about incentives for innovations that we need so urgently for solving these pressing problems independently of the legal entity and independently of the various incentives. It does make sense not only from a social and ecological perspective, not only when sustainability objectives play a huge role. No, it has also a stabilizing impact on the economic system as a whole. The second argument is that this new legal entity will increase also the equal opportunities. Even not well-to-do people will then be able to enter into the position of a partner in a company. This is true also if they are aligned to a set of values that is shared by these companies. So this would uncouple the access opportunities from the meritocratic principle. Even young entrepreneurs would give a reasonable and convincing pledge that they want to operate this business in the best interest of generations, as many family-run companies have done for ages. Therefore, it's not correct to create an opposition between family-run traditional businesses and the businesses in steward ownership. They are in a complementary relationship. Moreover, with family-run business, we see this in many areas, have quite often problems in succession. Here we need an alternative. It would make sense if with this initiative we have further options for succession routines. We are deeply interested in achieving this. We see a clear-cut responsibility, a sense of responsibility towards employees and towards locations. But in a study created by KfW, 464,000 small and medium enterprises will plan to abolish the business activity by 2025 and have problems in finding the successor. So a political remit is spun off from this. You need to facilitate, we as politicians need to facilitate the succession. Even such a society with such lock-in of capital would have an easier path towards succession, independently of whether they have a suitable heir or not. Moreover, we have particular opportunities in terms of infrastructure, in the sense of the political landscape it is very favorable. But I do not want to pay lip service only. I see also challenges with these new companies. An important aspect in the economic considerations regards the incentives for entrepreneurial action. Intrinsic motivation replaces the desire to achieve profits. Well, it may be in close connection and with an orientation towards the common good. The principal agent problem due to the principle of the active owner and partner replacing the absentee owner. But is it sufficient to reflect this also in clear-cut numbers on the deeply competitive market environment? What is pressing on my heart is to combine the disciplination of the investors in a company with lock-in capital. How can this be kept up permanently? The law of the oligarchy by sociologist Michels is applicable everywhere. A look into the history of economies shows that cooperatives that have a rather immobilized capital basis are quite often bought out in by another format. That's all the more an argument for this problem with the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain. They succeeded in doing so with innovation engines, but this now to regard the corporate governance, not the legal entity as such. Therefore, it's all the more important, as with any company, in view of different legal entities and with different designs, we need to complement this by a closely fitting and tailored and bespoke corporate governance. It does not say anything against this legal entity, but we would say there are specific challenges within this legal entity. Finally, with our colleagues in the Federal Ministry of Justice, we are working out the foundations for this new legal form. Any doubts and qualms that I have heard about could hardly be felt this morning. So I think there should be no obstacle to this common purpose. What has been enshrined in the coalition agreement is applicable. What we cannot relieve off your shoulders is the entrepreneurial task to develop a modern, up-to-date governance structure which might also lead to success. This new legal entity, the Steward-Ownership. We just want to create the conditions, a standalone legal entity for your purposes, for this objective that you are to select the one legal entity that is close to your purpose. We are up in arms by your side for this new form of freedom. Thank you very much.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Sven.
Thank you so much, Sven.
Danke, dass du uns eigentlich in der Theorie sozusagen mal ordnungspolitische Begründung geliefert hast.
Thank you, giving us the political justifications for the theory of this new legal form. And thanks also for pointing out an important point, in my opinion, which is the question of governance in these companies in steward ownership. What should it look like? How would it need to be structured to meet these challenges the new legal form would pose to these companies? Later, there will be a workshop around the issue of the legal form, and there will also be an opportunity to talk about this in more detail. We've also provided specific suggestions in this area. Once this issue of governance is resolved, it could be a very innovative organizational structure. Lene Skole from Denmark showed yesterday a comparison between companies in steward ownership and normal companies in other legal forms, and the registered patents in companies in steward ownership were twice as high compared to other companies. One thing I would like to know from you, I hope I can say this, Ricarda said it already, you pushed the envelope on this issue in the negotiations for the coalition agreement and also after. So if I may ask, on a public stage, what's your personal relationship to the topic? You knew the model when we first met. You'd heard of it, at least. You had an idea, a vague idea. When I first met you many years ago. What fascinated you? What made you rethink this topic? It's true. This guy here has been preaching everywhere for a while. You're sitting on a train and you mind your own business and you leave with a number of brochures and you know about the history of this topic. Well, you have to say, when I was studying, I came across this topic the first time. I dealt a lot with the setup of cooperatives, and there's a discussion around the neutralization of capital and how incentives would need to be controlled. One of the books I read on this, it was written by an attorney from Hamburg. He explained in a very complicated fashion of how basically the thing that you are doing could be set up in a public company, in a private limited company, and under other forms, and how it's been realized with the most complex and complicated contracts that you can imagine. it didn't really have the effect because it wasn't that interesting. If you do special contracts, and in Germany we know that historically there's always been an interest, at least since the 19th century, to found companies like that. What was done usually were consultations were bought, and they find solutions. Economic consultants, attorneys, accountants, and so on. But that's not a path for society of how to lead a company. And why did we finish off all the legal forms 100 years ago? Why can we not modernize it or continue to work on it? I don't get it. Back in the day, this was so much work to find something for the companies that we needed, for the setup we needed. We had to build in special clauses to achieve what we needed to achieve. That was the background for me personally. It was dealing with these topics. And you know that we're working on a strategy together with the Ministry of Education and Research. And I'm looking forward to this strategy, which is a national strategy, and it will also deal with this topic. The discussion that we're currently having is basically, does it really need a normal legal form in itself? Isn't a private limited company enough with some special clauses? You, as State Secretary, what do you think about this? What's your position in this course? Well, that's what I tried to say. Many companies see this as an option for themselves, but they don't have a path to do it because there's no legal form for it. Working out contracts is not very attractive. It's not sexy. You can tell them to go to this and that lawyer or accountant or consultant and do all these contracts. Well, that's not really attractive, is it? But if we say we've made good experiences with locked assets and ownership constructs, then it's just logical that we need an attractive legal form to facilitate this. If you think of founding a company, or you have discussions around a succession, or you want to make changes in your company, then this option could be a viable and very obvious option for you. That's why I mentioned the freedom of choice and visibility, and also the benefits, the economic benefits, that a great pluralization of legal forms can bring in a market economy. Okay, let's leave the topic of the legal form behind. You are responsible for various subsidy programs, investment options, and so on. Yesterday we had workshops around financing of steward-ownership companies. And what we hear again and again is that some of these instruments are particularly designed for taking in foreign capital and then eventually doing an exit. Can we revise these instruments and see if they could be suitable for companies in steward ownership? Do you see options here, any opportunities that maybe your ministry would also work on that and help us? One thing should be valid at all times. The various instruments of funding an organization should provide all the options. We see that also in organizations that have been founded by too many founders. This is sometimes a disadvantage for them when it comes to subsidies. If there's more than one entrepreneur, this will only lead to friction. In my experience, this is not always true, though. In some of these subsidy frameworks, there are biases like these. In the startup strategy, we defined particularly that we want to combat these inequalities and these biases where applicable and appropriate. In the coalition agreement, you will also find a similar note. But this doesn't only apply to you, it applies to everybody who's not following the standard model. I think diversity in our society is needed, and it's also needed in our companies. Diversity helps everyone and helps the growth of everyone, and this holds true for companies as well. Thank you so much. That's really a concession you made there. We're already over time. Is there anything that you would like to say for us, to the entrepreneurs, to push this forward? No. I loved your Star Wars event. That was spot on. Maybe next time we need more Jedis, but I think that was pretty cool and effective. One thing I can still leave you with: if you, as a company, based on your structure, encounter hurdles, we also have the mission to cut red tape. Please let us know. Send us an email. We will look into it. We are always interested. I like concrete information like that, but also in general for the socio-ecological transformation. If there are any challenges or hurdles that you encounter, we've already been combating them when it comes to renewable energies, and we want to continue to do these efforts. Also when it comes to legal forms, and we need you as companies and your help in this. So challenge us, please, all of us in the coalition, not just one party, and that's what I would like to invite you to do. Thank you very much.
Danke, dass du da warst. Sollte ich jetzt noch kurz die Briefe machen?
Okay.
Ja. Also, Sie wurden jetzt schon zweimal erwähnt, die Jedis,
The Jedis were mentioned twice already. That's why I would like to open the presentation again. We have one little action. We've tried many things to reach the minister who is really decisive in this. Of course, he doesn't decide everything. We've heard that there's many stakeholders on the political realm fighting for this, but there's one minister who is really decisive here, and it's Marco Buschmann, as you've heard. Some of you have also sent him emails or letters. We've sent him collective letters, individual letters, for 1.5 years, even before he was a minister, because we already knew he was an important voice when it came to legal topics. Within the FDP, we tried to get in touch with him, and it was never successful. And that's why we even went out and tried to find him. We saw that he was on the German Attorney Day. He was speaking there, so Carl and I went there. We dressed up. Yeah, on the 4th of May, May the 4th be with you. All fans of Star Wars of you will be familiar with this. He posted something on Instagram himself, disguised as a Jedi. On Instagram, there were press releases on this as well. And this was our path to find him. So we dressed up as Jedis. We attended the German Attorney Day as Jedis. He couldn't avoid us. He had to talk to us, and he did. And he said that he's actually basically in favor of the whole idea, and that there is misinformation being put out around him, that he has prejudice or bias against the topic. We invited him, therefore, to join this conference. This is our invitation. How we can fight the empire, and that we are worried for the European galaxy and its market economy, that it, as we've already heard, the society with lock-in assets could be the star shedding light for the future. We invited him, but he didn't join us. So that is why we thought, if that didn't work, now we need your help. under your seat, you will find an envelope, a hidden envelope, with a white sheet of paper. It's already addressed to the minister. And it is your opportunity now to send him a personal message. The Minister of Justice, Marco Buschmann. Maybe just make a few, these are just a few suggestions. You could write that you really missed him on the conference, that you would like to have a personal meeting. We don't have to put any pressure on him. We want to meet him. We don't want to put pressure on him to speed up the process. I know from some of you here today who asked me yesterday, when can we expect the legal form? I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it with my company. Put that down. That really goes to show what the significance is. He's never really met any one of us. He doesn't know what critical, political issue this is for many of you. You can do this during the break. You can do this whenever you like to, and then hand it in to us. Please write your return address on the back, because the Ministry of Justice doesn't accept letters without a return address. So if it is from you, please put your address so he can reply to you. The more do it, the better it is. That's a small action that we have planned for today. And if you want to meet him, maybe this will help. Thank you so much. You can hand them in at the info point or when you leave the room. And now I will hand back to our house. This is it for me for today. Lena, stage is yours.
Wonderful. Please hand in your letters. We would be happy to have a big sack of letters. Well, we have reached the next session, socio-political and economic relevance of steward-ownership. I would now welcome Professor Dr. Lars Feld. He is director of Walter Eucken Institute. He is the personal advisor to the Federal Minister of Finance from 2020 to 2021. He was also the president of the 5 advisory members of the economic wise people, the wise. Thank you very much. Thank you. You can hear me. Well, the hall is too big to be filled with my voice. I am very happy with this invitation. As a matter of fact, well, I think it is clear the idea of this GmbH with locked capital has been advocated by me. What is the reason in favor of this initiative? I think it is, for the most part, in line with what Sven Giegold said. Basically, the discussion about this initiative has been boiling up for this reason that you see here on the slide. The key word is here steward ownership. The fact that the family entrepreneurs or that's why the association took up arms against it. They had the illusion but we do have responsibility. The family entrepreneurs said, well, we do have already responsibility. This was a misleading hint. What is important in the discussion with Maja Göpel afterwards, not in the discussion with Sven Giegold, but even before. What is the relevance in the idea of sustainability? It's not social, ecological objectives. Well, the relevance in sustainability terms is that the company as such remains sustainable. It's necessary to bring about such a new legal form that must be open for any purpose, for any object of a business. It must not be overfraught with certain purposes or with certain ends. In the discussion, even critical legal experts say that a similar legal form could be created in the sense of entreprise à mission, in the sense of the French law, where you have from the scratch the GmbH with a locked capital was termed by myself as the deeply liberal idea, because it allows you to bring your company into the future with the content. Yes, it has a binding effect on the success generations, be it employees, be it also your personal heirs or family members. Nonetheless, it is utterly right from the perspective of freedom. If you want to preserve this idea, if you want to preserve the idea that you have filled with life all your life, there is a reference to family companies. As Sven Giegold quite aptly said, we have so many problems with succession in the family-run business. It's utterly difficult to instill enthusiasm for example, a meat factory, and the entire family eats only vegetarian food. Well, you will have a problem on your hands. Of course, you may also have higher margins with meat replacement products. Nonetheless, the basis for the business activities will still be the meat production, so it may end up more difficult. It will not carry this company into the future. Well, you might say it's rightly so, because we do not want to people to eat meat in the future. But you might say it falls under the legislative competence of the federal states or of Europe. It's not only family-run businesses, it's also about the startups. This point that has been mentioned repeatedly, this exit orientation, it comes from the Anglo-Saxon tradition from the very beginning, be it the foundation of a company or the preservation of a company. From the very beginning, what is the exit? How can I get out of this company again? Quite often, startups are set up with this idea. Last but not least, here in Berlin, think of all the digital startups that are most of the times also bought out by Google, if they are good ones. But we have a diversity of different ideas. Again, startups and the founders of startups, well, they might come up with the idea that they want to bring this into the future. They want it to be carried on. They do not want it to be exposed to the pressure of the capital markets, especially when it comes to buyouts. So we have a variety of purposes and objectives, especially in the field of small and medium enterprises that are so representative for the success of the social market economy in Germany. These small and medium-sized enterprises must succeed in carrying the company successfully into the future. So the private limited company with locked-in capital is the one. Due to the lock-in, the barrier to dividends makes sure that this company stays for the future, that it cannot be dissolved, so it manages to exercise a binding obligation to retain the capital so that it cannot be drained. The advantages that exist here are, among so many other things, the easy transfer. Today, if companies go into this direction, they need to take out heavy expenditure to achieve this transition. We have so many concomitant legal paraphernalia, for example, in the transition of Bosch into a foundation, and even the FAZ, as we heard, which means if it generates an additional cost, if you have to hire an armada of legal experts, accountants, auditors to select this option, well, smaller companies will shy away from such a costly enterprise because they cannot shoulder this transaction cost. So such a new legal form would not only facilitate the options, which are quite complicated today. It also abolishes unnecessary red tape. It also alleviates transaction cost, and it helps entrepreneurs to follow up on their path to economic success. These are the major advantages that come along with this new form, because at the end of the day, we would succeed in achieving something that we have been discussing for a long time, i.e., reshaping the foundations, preserving this type of social market economy to bring these foundations of the social market economy further into the future without dismantling the foundations. And the discussion, well, I touched upon this. We have these buyouts by the capital market, and some critics say it's just a bulwark against the buyouts of the capital markets. Well, first, we do have so many companies that are open to the capital market. Second, the capital market does have access, or the access of the capital market is not totally barred, and there is also a possibility to buy certain shares. Whether it is an attractive strategy remains to be seen, but it is still doable. So you should not make this new legal form into a bulwark against buyouts. I think we need to preserve this openness and the transparency in Germany. But this does not mean that the companies that have enshrined in their set of objectives to be preserved for the future, this should not prevent them from preserving this long-term mindset. The second point that is now heatedly debated in the Federal Ministry of Justice are the aspects of the European legislation. Not that the Federal Ministry does not want to fulfill its responsibility, but it is down to the fact that things are a bit more complicated than they might appear. Fiscal questions also arise. Two aspects need to be picked up on. First, the law of inheritance, and also the fiscal treatment on the profits. When it comes to fiscal treatment of profits, well, we will have, fiscal treatment of profits, it means, on the one hand, in your income tax, if you have personally liable partners, on the other hand, you have the corporate tax. If they are capital-based corporations, you have to deduct the relevant taxes. On top of that comes the industrial tax. Well, the reason for the problem in this case is that, and this is the analogon to the income tax, you have also a compensatory tax because you do not have any dividends paid out. So you do not have any reason for introducing also this compensatory tax, because you will be under the same fiscal regime as any other type of tax, not only the settlement tax. Well, in the main in the annual assembly of any limited partnership, you will have also this settlement of the settlement tax, and the retained taxes are then used to promote the objectives of the company. One difference with Sven Giegold, I think we should not just focus on intrinsic motivation of the employees or the entrepreneurs that act in this legal form. I think this is not the everything, because certain profits are achieved and they are reinvested, they are fed back into the assets of the company. So these profits cannot be withdrawn. The problem that we have in the fiscal treatment with dividend taxation, and that's the international dimension, which requires hard work. If they think and reflect on it, it does not mean that they don't do anything. So I can. It's not always to the liking of everybody. Especially, it's not an easy exercise to do with fiscal treatment. As to the inheritance tax, Again, it's not an easily solved problem because it's not about if you have a family-run company and you have a family-run company transitioned into a company with locked capital, it's not for the purpose of evading taxes or avoiding taxes. You need to create a fiscal instrument that replaces this inheritance tax also in the locked-in capital companies, which right now we have a tax haven for huge assets that are given away through inheritance, which brings me to my close. I have run over time. When I was asked last autumn whether I was willing to provide advice to the Federal Minister of Finance. I am not a member to any political party, and nor will I ever enter a political party to the end of my life. I accepted this responsibility. Because especially in situations of crisis that we are living in, we have a rapid succession of so many crises in short periods, not so often. We had this in the first half of 19th century with even more serious crises than the ones that we are having now. Nonetheless, we have a massive succession of crises. In such situations, we must not only be guided by the necessities of the day-to-day business of the crisis management, but we must never lose sight of the compass of political order. I think this idea to create a private limited company with locked capital, this is a suitable tool for bringing us forward into the future. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insights on legal forms and questions of tax. This was very detailed. I would like to introduce Maja Göpel, a political economist and transformation researcher. She is at the interface of policies, science, and economics. She will give us a broader view on steward ownership and its role in an economy in transformation. And then we will also have a panel discussion here on the stage after that. Now the stage is yours, Maja. Thank you for the invitation. I think it is great how many events we have at the moment where people have a big narrative in society that usually leads to a feeling of powerlessness, and then we have these events and there's this momentum where we say purpose, like the foundation is called, purpose is something that sets something free in us, especially in situations of crises. We say, now more than ever. Let's really look at how we react at crises. And depending on how we react on crises, this also affects if we have more crises in the future. And this is what I would like to present to you today, to give you that bigger picture. What's important, in my opinion, as also Sven Giegold mentioned, is the term of freedom and responsibility. Does that go together? Freedom and taking on or the freedom to take on responsibility is something that you all are in favor of and that you want to facilitate with the correct structural conditions. Phases of transformation are also phases of change in structures, and for changes in structures, the political conditions need to be adapted. That means also legal conditions like legal forms. Maybe something that up until today was good no longer serves tomorrow. So innovation and ex-innovation go together if we want to lead transformation and drive it forward. I think that compass is really useful. Yeah, responsibility, and in the German word this entails also responding to. something. So to what? This is the red thread that I want to follow along. I want to give you a bit of an outlook on the context. Where are we at? What are the challenges of our time that we can find small solutions for and answers for? What are the questions we have to initially ask, though? In my opinion, there is a big change of paradigm that we deal with across many, many sciences. On a planet with limited capability, how can we achieve a satisfactory strategy to fulfill their needs? And that's something I think is important, because in our societal discourse, we often still hear that we need more consumption and that people need to be able to have more to secure prosperity. But what is the underlying question of what's the good life? Giving an impetus. What's the contribution of companies for society? What impetus do they give? This is not doesn't have anything to do with centralized structure like in dictatorships, but it could be better. It could be more sustainable, which means it holds up in the long run. And today, we're in a situation where we have to make that freedom systemic. Where are we at? Yes, at a capital market, but do we have to stick with the capital markets as they are today, or maybe they aren't ideal? They are not the best disciplinary instruments. Where is the problem? Why do we not manage to build up sustainable business models? So there's a trend, but we can also build a counter trend with a new legal form, for example. We can give new impetus for new ideas. So I think the bigger picture of the systems around us is really important to find solutions. The next point, long-term exit orientation, as it was mentioned also. This working fast as possible within the boundaries of technology. But in many fields, not only biologically, but also socially, maybe doing this is too much for the living systems that accompany us. They need a certain frequency and a certain rhythm until value chains can be rebuilt and rethought. And this pressure on the short term doesn't go together with these goals. This is something that I think is very important in your general idea. If this all will fit in one legal form or not is a good question. But this focus on the long run also entails that rhythms change, frequencies change, cycles change. Financialization towards a value orientation is important, I think. What's the value? What do we want to achieve with new legal forms of companies? And then the last point, extraction and regeneration, which brings us back to the rhythms, as well as how do we want to develop strategies to fulfill the needs of the people within the means of the corporate world in the 21st century, where we know that the boundaries of our planet are not limitless. What is the end result that we want? Good profits, of course, are also discussed. General economy or B corporations, how can we use these things and move away from a narrative that is focused on numbers? What I can measure gives me an idea of where value is created. Maybe we can correct that, though. We still protect systems of losses. Let's just think of the food sector. We still protect some fields, and that makes it really hard for the actors and stakeholders in these fields to change something for the long run and to make it more sustainable. And only with transparency do we see where we need to act and where we can act, and thusly take on responsibility and find answers to improve our future. Using and exploiting the resources, may it be human or financial or natural, is not a good strategy for the long run. And then, Also, another point, what's the narrative? What's the most valuable resource at the moment? I think it's really interesting to see how also in the field of technology there is a movement towards using the benefits of digitalization to find answers. So not just the quick exit. It's really hard to include social concerns and ecological concerns in your business model if you're focused on the quick exit, but thinking more in the long run and wanting to contribute in this as well. We see so much happening here at the moment on the investor side as well as the tech side. And I'm looking forward to talking with Verena about this briefly. Then extraction versus investment. I think that's something we really have to work on. This is in so many fields. Think of the real estate market, think of land ownership. It's not always for the benefit of the people living there, but for the people who have the disciplinary power, but don't live in these areas. So, isn't investment just another tool in our system? It's just money in itself is just a means to help cooperation in humanity. And how can we use this social technology of money and align it with a value creation, a better value creation, where it is invested? So that's an interesting thought, and I think it's important to define these terms very well so that we develop a common terminology we use. I agree with you, Sven. Sometimes it says, you said sometimes we need fit for purpose and not just tweaking little things here and there, but innovation and structural change isn't just consumers or voters, but it's changing everything, the way we behave, the way we do things, to adapt them to the big challenges of our time and to improve people's everyday lives. And that's what you do here, and that's how I understand the term purpose. And especially in times of crisis, I think we should put an emphasis on this and react. And always get back to the initial question, what is it all about? And then, this is my last point, we would achieve a definition of growth that I'd be happy with. And that's not the sum of money available to a society, but the sum of solutions available to a society to stabilize their society and provide reliability. So many are worried of changing the status quo because they don't know what the future would bring. But in many areas, we see people are looking for alternatives. And we see momentum towards taking more risks. The availability of solutions would really help us and drive our better future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maja Göpel, also for giving us the broader picture and look at the entire world, basically. We have now time to rearrange the stage, and I will be back with the other panelists that participate in the discussion. Please bring the chairs. Wonderful. I will place all the handheld microphones. Two of the panelists have already spoken, Professor Maja Göpel and Professor Lars Feld, but I would like to announce two other panelists. Nora Bossong, she's a writer. In the Twitter profile I found her. She's also a debating member of society and also a reader. Schutzzonen Webers Protokoll and Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, private limited company. She has received numerous awards for her writing. And Verena Pauster, entrepreneur, expert for digital education, Vogel in Harvard, the Digital Lab. The other two have already been presented. Please join me on the stage. It's very nice. It has been very exciting, these tensions. Lars Feld, you have zoomed in very much on this fact that you understand steward ownership as a liberal idea. And you see freedom in the fact that this model is not charged with a moral or ethical supercharge. Why would I lose freedom if I charge this? Because the legal institution would become less attractive. Only those people who want to follow this objective would choose this legal entity, while the arch-liberal idea would mean that anybody could join this. I wouldn't Bosch. As for the case of Bosch, well, the Bosch Foundation was not set up with this purpose of a social and ecological transformation. Nonetheless, with such a legal institution, the foundation would be equipped better. Well, Bosch will not go back or will not withdraw from the selected legal form because it would be extremely expensive, and it is expensive to transition one company into another legal form. But we would make it possible for so many other players and actors to select this without supercharging or this legal construct with a purpose. But one could say we are in a situation of the world or of the economic system where we could say it is desirable that more and more companies make a pledge to the social and ecological responsibility. So you could say we need it anyway. Still, you would say we want to preserve. You would say we want to strengthen the idea of freedom to express this openness. Well, things like sustainability can be interpreted in so many different ways, but legal entities or legal forms are designed to last for a long time. We do not know what will come in 100 years if we assert this. Well, we are wrong from scratch. Therefore, I would say, well, the legal form as such should not be overcharged. The social economic framework conditions must be the right ones. Despite all intrinsic motivation on the market, well, the framework must be right. So I would rather make a plea for the changes in the framework rather than filling content into this new legal form. So I would say we do not need a well, may I react to this? It was not about squeezing that in, this content. My feeling is that in 100 years' time, we will still need reliable basis for our subsistence, for our mere existence as mankind, so without the polluted oceans. So my feeling is that this remit will stay for us for a long term, but not necessarily in this legal form. We have a hodgepodge of tools, but the governing impact of such a tool. Freedom is not absolute free, but we have a preset structure that enables me to exercise my freedom. Subsidies, we have certain privileges that can be questioned. I'm with you, but we should not elude ourselves where we should set priorities, where we would say, this is sustainable economy, because sustainability in economy means also fit for the future. Intermediate applause, yes. Verena, you are an entrepreneur, but you are also a family entrepreneur. Your company will have the day after tomorrow 300 years in existence. You could be happy to be part of this establishment. Well, you could pass your time with other things, but you said you will stand up. And why do you join our discussion? When the startup scene grew up, and I grew up in the startup scene, not in the sense that I am so high, but family entrepreneurs said they are not entrepreneurs because they want to sell off their company as quickly as possible, while entrepreneurs want to retain their company as long as possible. Then the Steward-Ownership initiative comes and they say they are not entrepreneurs because they want to socialize their companies. It's almost like communism. This is not a good fit for us. And then I think, well, it's a closed shop. It's a sovereignty about interpreting what is and who is an entrepreneur. And a closed shop is the opposite of an open society. And new solutions and new spaces for action. I'm the 10th generation in a family-run business. Hey, super, but I have done very little. I'm proud of this because it takes so much energy, so much work to reinvent your company for 300 years. Therefore, yes, I can be proud of this achievement. Nonetheless, at the same time, I wanted entrepreneurs to be also first-generation entrepreneurs and to be taken seriously and to be looked at with the same esteem as family-run companies that are more than 100 years old. This is not an opposition. This is the hallmark of an open and equitable society, and I am deeply committed to this. Nora Bossong, you write in your book, Private Limited Company, published in 2012, so it's some years ago. You talk about a main character, Louise, if I remember correctly. The family, she becomes by necessity a family entrepreneur. She needs to look for ways to rescue the company. What would your main character say about steward-ownership? Freedom that she missed and freedom that she would have had if this legal institute, well, it would have been more interesting what her father had said. Coutintier said his principle was to destroy what came after him and to get rid of anything that was before him. It's a suboptimal solution, to put it mildly, both for himself and for his heir, for Louise. Life would have been much easier if he had this company with locked-in capital. Even back then, when he was forced to inherit something that he did not want to inherit. What happens if any family does not find the right heir or suitable heiress? This has been voiced repeatedly, and this will certainly become more urgent in the future because people tend to follow different lines, more and more divergent from the purposes of the Herbert Quandt Foundation. Well, I have seen it outside on the logo. Well, the actual heir was not the one that was predestined because the legitimate heir had died of an infection. So he was a successor. It is still not a customary practice that family-run companies have a employees share. It's almost like a red cloth. It's a no-go. An external manager, find one who goes with the same passion, will be followed, will be taken seriously by the employees, and will also be left alone by the shareholders. And then you have your permanent salary, but you will not have a dividend, a share in the profits, but you must give everything. So this Steward-Ownership company would also break up the new ground for a new discussion. Why shouldn't outsiders become part of a family-run business? With startups, you have also stock option programs that could be also transferred to family-run business. So in other words, this discussion is a problematic one. It's almost like a motivation, a leverage for motivation, where you would say, I am the manager, I would like to become committed to this company, but I want to get a reward. I am in competition in a startup. We do not have a wealth of skilled workers. We do not have an excess of successors. Nobody wants to go out in the woods to be bullied around by the owners. It's not super attractive. You have to reinvent this company model. The question arises, the younger the new generations are that enter into the inheritance, into the succession. A family-run business is not only a family business if it has this ownership only by family members, but if it encapsulates the spirit that you do everything to have the survival of this company, no matter whether it works so in a social mindset or becomes a social company, only then will it be a true family company. Even if only 80% of the assets are held by family members. I think from a broader perspective, this holds true also for Germany, because we have the demographic challenges that places a lot of problems on our doorstep. With the structure of strong, small and medium-sized enterprises, we have fared very well in Germany. Many companies that are classified as family businesses, typically they are located in rural areas, unlike other countries around the world, but especially in the developed countries in the US, UK, France. We have a connectedness in the rural areas. We do not just have winners and losers along the regions. Unlike France, where we have a huge concentration on Paris, we have so many secondary centers on East Westphalia, nor the Schwäbische Alb are urban conurbations or aggregates of major cities. Nonetheless, they have an enormous economic power, and they retain also their employees because people live happily there. Yes, let me add to this. I have a hard time thinking about this. How can we communicate the structural change different? Ex-novation, Verena, when you say do everything to keep the company, I think it's utterly important to separate businesses from the business model. Because you say we have reinvented ourselves. That's why we are still on the scene. Business models, which business models should be exited or abolished? We have a quite pyramidal and hierarchical pattern. For example, we have it in the public office and also in the academic system, where you have the director's posts, and in the middle hierarchical range, you have to work hard to get a foothold, while those at the very top have a safe haven. And how can we change this? So that we have a division of roles. I can also let go of something. I can even step back. If anyone else is more fit for purpose than I. How can we rephrase this culturally in a way that even letting go, even renouncing can be grandeur, can be a sign of greatness? That would be an outstanding contribution to making something new happen. I find this very worrisome. You need to listen to losers, you need to compensate losers. I think if we just stop categorizing losers and winners, we would get some substantial way forward, because only then will we be able to create new forms. We could be listen to outsiders. We should fluidize those deeply encrusted hierarchical structures. That is utterly exciting, because I must say it's very much on my mind, and I'm very worried about this societally. From my point of view, this is encapsulated in the DNA of family companies. They must not fail. Different from startups. Startups can also fail. Family businesses, well, must not fail. Banks have given the first funds, but in the family business, as in the steward-ownership, you have as the premise to let go of things that do no longer work and put at risk the whole. In our case, to put it, we have been producing textiles for 99% of all the weavers have gone bankrupt. We were 1% that has not gone bankrupt, because we have let go of everything that characterized us to that point, and we switched to technical textiles, air bikes, armored vests, arm-proof vests. It was a minimum market. Our employee number shrunk from 2,000 to 400. Our sales went down. Nonetheless, this company is robust and healthy. Only that it is much smaller than back then. But that is a strength. This is a virtue. And the generations that have been achieved this are now being praised. Not that you have shrunk it to health. It wouldn't have made sense for a startup. If you cut it in 4 quarters, you were a unicorn. Now you want me to finance you for 250 million, you are a loser. What type of losers are you? So I think it's deeply ingrained in the DNA of family-owned companies to find always the best solution and not the short-term profit.
Nora, you always in your books also deal with societal questions and topics like inequality, redistribution, and so on. What are your thoughts? I'm hearing what people have said up here. I agree with many points, but I would like to add another level. Maybe this level is different perspective. Based on human sciences. I think my my perspective is a bit closer to Mr. Feld's, and I prefer to not ethically and morally supercharge topics. The reason for this is easy. You can put it simply if you look at something from 2 sides. You can be Mandelwild's Bienenfabel or Adam Smith's work, and the question of how altruistic is the human being and what will bring our society forward. Is it altruism? As a reader, I'm closer to Mandelwild's standpoint, who says, nah, we're all acting for ourselves first of all. But that doesn't mean we have to go to war to achieve technological advancement. We know that technological advances, some of them, wouldn't have happened without war. But describing what Mandelwild what Mandelbligt's standpoint is still relevant today. He shows that society is divided up in two classes. There is the bees queen. She is high up. She doesn't have any real commodities or goods, so she only has imaginary goods to satisfy everybody. And then there's the lower class who work like slaves, who try to keep her happy. And then there's the slightly superior class who acts morally, who is altruistic because of some intrinsic motivation. But also this class acts based on narcissistic decision-making because they see themselves as superior. He describes it much better than I just did, but it's worth a read because it shows that societal clash. Putting it simple or a bit too simple, the vegan caterer versus the low-income household or single person who goes to Aldi to shop for meat. This clash of different sides of our society, which also involves much inequality, is important. But who can really afford to be that moralistic, to have a standpoint like that so much based on morals? That doesn't mean that I am saying that the finiteness of our resources is something we should approach differently. No, I'm not saying that. I just say we should also acknowledge that we all act in our own interest. If I wrote a trilogy, all in line with society of this and that, then I wouldn't want the third part to be society with destroyed future. I would like to ask a question. I have two ideas here. Moralizing everything invites us to assess the things that we should analyze. First of all, it's not about finding a culprit. It's about resolving a situation. It's about building wealth so there's more space for everybody. And then I can rethink the different roles of individuals in society. As a consumer, I can give some sort of impetus. But the general question of structuring my freedoms that lies with policymakers and decision makers. For example, in a restaurant, I can only choose from the menu. And if the menu is regulated, that changes that too. So the question of lifestyle shouldn't be involved in the discussions around political responsibility to give these offers to society. And if I understood you correctly, Lena, if we don't build this legal form, then we need to ask ourselves what frameworks, what conditions does our economy need today to deal with the costs, which will be there always, so that those who are really interested in making change happen get the instruments to exert pressure. And then we have moral battles. Only some will be able to afford this. And it is the role of policymakers to align this. So, Mr. Feld, how can we help you? How can we set the incentives within the various systems? And how can we simplify these processes so that economic action helps all of us human beings who want to live in freedom and ideally sustainable as well? The Ministry of Finance. It's the same. No, it's not the same, and not because of the parties that hold those houses, but because of their responsibilities. But responsibilities is another issue. I've been in my consulting role not only since this year, I've started doing that since in 2003 in various capacities. I started doing this activity, doing consulting, already assuming that many of the things we want to change politically and societally are limited. We have the big visions, but we always have to use our status quo as the initial starting point and step by step achieve change. And my experiences since then have only affirmed this assumption. Status quo always wants to multiply, and it's really, really hard to change that. Well-established interests serve the status quo or that enjoy the status quo because of profits or because it's simple not to change. Those interests have more ways to fight change. Speaking generally, with the frameworks we have available along the system, we need to address certain points to try and achieve change. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you can't sulk and give up, but you try it again in very detailed and laborious work. And how can we create more pressure? Well, we have high pressure. We are heading from one crisis to another. Crises exert pressures always. The necessity for change is obvious for everybody. Never waste a good crisis. You might have heard this before, and that's actually so true. And that's the situation we are in right now, and this winter it will only exacerbate. We're hopeful. Was that choosing to use the crisis more or what? Well, you don't enter it and then you just exacerbate the crisis. You don't do that in politics, at least not on purpose. It happens by itself. Policymakers and everybody else in this country is exposed to certain developments that are out of our control. When Putin will turn off the gas, we didn't know in spring this year. We had to take the situation as it developed and prepare for all scenarios. In certain situations, you end up in a situation you didn't want, that you didn't make happen and that you didn't ask for. Looking at these geopolitical challenges, I've been saying for a while that these are also the biggest economic challenges of the coming decades. But I was mostly thinking of China, not of Russia. The war on Ukraine is outside of any normal economic logic. Russia is just mid-level, economically speaking. It used to be Russia is a gas station, and it's really easy to, or kind of easy, to get away from resources like that. It's much more easy than getting away or getting rid of the dependency of China as a manufacturer. So it wasn't something we expected at all. We couldn't expect that Putin would attack Ukraine, but it's a situation we find ourselves in today. I'm really happy that you mentioned Mendeville. Actually, depending on or independent of your decision, whether altruism or selfishness, what's important is that we can use those to describe the conditions of our society. And this makes clear that economics is a science of freedom. In a situation of war, of course, this is more difficult. Now, you also want to say something? Yeah, I also wanted to say something to steward-ownership. I just wanted to say, so little people in this country are founding companies. Now, we are saying we would like a new legal form, but we cannot put high expectations on steward-ownership, not too much. It's not going to solve all problems. What I would like to see is that we put incentives for people to found companies in steward-ownership, and it might not change everything and resolve all problems, but it will give life to this legal form. And then we can look at it closer. We can look at its developments. We can set incentives. Do we have to pay out returns? How does that work in a construct like this? So I'm really would say the established economic world can rethink its operation, and new spurting up economics or economic activity, you can use these new forms. And I think that will be very helpful. When the legal form will exist, we need more people, or we need a lot of people that do it, not just a few. Otherwise, all the work wouldn't have been worth it. Maja, we already heard from you, but I have one question for you. We can see also from the audience's reaction, you always draw kind of an optimistic picture. It always feels encouraging to me and inspiring, and I would like to live in the world you describe. At the same time, we see the privatization of hospitals, or because of absentee ownership, owners that don't have anything to do with clinics. We see startups that are not profitable but are supercharged with capital and artificially kept alive until eventually the speculation fulfills, hopefully. We see hundreds of thousands of electronic scooters in some cities in Europe. What I ask myself is the entrepreneurial freedom a contradiction to societal freedom? Can you resolve this for me, this contradiction, or what are your thoughts? In times of crisis, we see competition between systems, and it's hard to find common ground. How do we achieve that good life that you're always describing? Well, it's that patchwork, as Lars mentioned. So we want to achieve a society that we define in our constitution with the SDGs of the United Nations and other tools. The next step would be, which transformation as a term in itself tries to show, that probably frameworks will not frameworks from the 1950s will not help us to achieve that. So we need an update. The organizing framework that we have should really push more in one or the other direction. I would also like to see policy making that is focused on results. I would like to see maybe once a year an analysis of the measures that were done and how they contribute to achieving the bigger goals, and not just how voters are feeling about the individual person. And communicating that, that would be the first step. And then secondly, the second step is with the companies. Use your power, use what's working well, and then step by step get closer to the ideal situation. Maybe start with the legal form. Maybe this provides you with less pressure in the short term, and you can work better towards your long-term goals, especially in agriculture, for example. You need 6 to 8 years for renewable cycles, and that helps with your crop. So if policymakers do not only focus on binding CO2 emissions, but maybe also helping biodiversity, and so on, all of these things can really help, and all of a sudden my business model is really viable. So the overlapping of metrics, of storytelling, and the frameworks help us. The metrics in numbers tell us a story as well. They show us if we are on the right path. We've defined it in terms of politics, and then we can use those metrics to see where we're going. We also have to talk about the big challenges and be really, really honest and be transparent without blaming, without trying to find a culprit. Where are the biggest pressures? Where are the biggest hurdles? And then communicate that back to policymakers. But we also want from all ministries to put this into the coalition agreement if something has changed in the meantime. That's what I would like to see.
Gibt es noch jemanden, dem was auf der Zunge brennt? Was letztes
Somebody, does any one of you have something they really want still to say? We are just a bit over the time,
Reaktion darauf?
but if there is still something that you need to say, that you want to say,
Schlusswort, wunderbar. Ich danke euch. Ich finde, wir haben
okay, there isn't. So thank you so much. We have already seen in this panel
glaube ich, alle einen ähnlichen
discussion that
dass es irgendwie
we all have the same image where we want to be in the future. We want to have free societies where everybody gets along and is happy societies and maintain the basis of our life, which is this planet. Maybe how to get there varies in our individual ideas, but that's why we need exchange. Thank you so much.
Briefe. Das ist
Please stay seated just for a moment.
aber danke für die Erinnerung.
Yes, the letters.
Mittagspause.
Now we have a lunch break.
Ihr habt womöglich eure Briefe noch.
During lunch, you have the opportunity to write your letters if you haven't done so already. Please do write your letters. Then you can hand them in at the info point. We will collect them and mail them to Mr. Bushman. Thank you so much and enjoy lunch.